It's a death toll equivalent to 8 Germanwings Airbus crashes. The 1,200 would-be migrants drowned in less than a week in the Mediterranean, prompting Europe's leaders to convene an emergency summit. Measures discussed in Brussels range from Germany's suggestion to let in more asylum seekers to an Italian idea to set up processing centers in places like faraway Tunisia, Niger, and even Sudan. And there's how to patrol the seas. Should it be more search and rescue or search and destroy, targeting smugglers and their boats? What does it all say about today's Europe and those desperate enough to try their luck crossing over? Today in the France 24 debate, decision time for Europe. With us to talk about it, she's a member of the European Parliament from the French Conservative UMP party, Constance Le Grip. Many thanks for being with us.
Hello.
We want to thank, for joining us from London, Gaim Kibraid, director of the Refugees Studies Centre at London University. Thank you for being with us. And from London, South Bank University. And from Brussels, France 24 Europe editor Christophe Robit, who is at that summit of the France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Yeah, as we were saying, search and rescue or search and destroy. Christophe Robit, it sounds like a little bit of both when we see what's been leaked to the press in terms of what will be on the final document.
Absolutely. As you said, all 28 heads of state and government are currently meeting here in Brussels. An emergency meeting that was agreed on Monday, very much after the Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi insisted that it was now time for all leaders to come together in Brussels and discuss this very difficult question. There are three aspects in my view. First, what they're trying to discuss is how do you save lives at sea? Second, how do you crack down on smugglers? And three, how do you better share the burden across Europe? Just one figure, Francois, there are 28 member states. Well, 5 EU countries take in more than 50% of the total amount of asylum seekers, Sweden and Germany being the most generous. Now, regarding the first aspect, saving lives at sea and really making sure that such tragedies don't happen again in the future, because, of course, they are a shame for Europe. Well, there we hear a lot of things, but NGOs are not entirely convinced. What Europe wants to do at the moment it's to increase the financial resources for Frontex. Frontex being, of course, the EU border agency, which is in charge of the Triton mission operations across the Mediterranean. There is one problem, though. Triton was never designed as a rescue operation. It is essentially a border control, a border patrol operation, and their NGOs are very critical. What they say is that basically what Europe needs is a comprehensive rescue operation modelled on Mare Nostrum, which was launched by the Italians back in October 2013 after Lampedusa, but which was stopped in November last year because it was very costly and it had to be funded at the time by the Italians.
Had to be funded at the time by the Italians, and Triton patrolling much closer to Europe's borders. How does it look? Have you been able to do any kind of a head count, Christophe? Which way will it go in terms of, will Triton become a search and rescue operation?
Well, I think what will emerge from this meeting is, of course, a commitment to beef up Triton, if you want, and we'll be told that, for instance, the operational area of Triton will be extended. So far, Triton only operates within 30 miles of the Italian shores. Now, this is not enough, as you know, to save the lives of all these migrants who are put on unseaworthy ships by smugglers. But the chair of Triton has been very clear. Said, "Look, I don't have the means to save all the lives, so I think we'll be somewhere between. But at least there is, I think, the understanding that Europe must step up to the plate because, of course, this is a European problem. Mare Nostrum means our sea, as you know. This is a pan-European problem, and Italy can't be left alone to deal with the problem. Malta can't be left alone to be dealing with the problem. So there needs to be a European problem, a European solution. But I think we're still far from what human rights activists have been calling for. We're still far for an ambitious life and rescue operation, not least because some countries are very skeptical. That includes the United Kingdom, for instance. They fear that if you set up a large rescue mission where you have helicopters, ships patrolling all across the Mediterranean, it will lead to what they call a pull factor. It will actually encourage the smugglers to put even more people on those boats. The UN does not agree with this view. The UN has put forward some figures showing that since the end of Mare Nostrum, the amount of refugees who are trying to reach Italy has actually increased.
Constance Le Grip, the Italian Interior Minister, saying we should be braced for 5,000 arrivals per week between now and September. So what do you do? Do you turn that Frontex system, which is basically to guard the borders, into a rescue operation?
We have to do both. We have to continue to control our external borders, of course, because this is what our citizens are waiting for. But we have an emergency. We have a real human emergency, which is to save life and to strengthen our presence at sea in order to save life and to rescue more people. So we have to do both. We have to set up rescue missions and we have to reinforce the external borders control, and that can be done via Frontex if, of course, we put enough money, enough assets, enough human resources in this agency.
So far, what we're seeing, though, from both the British Prime Minister, the German Chancellor, is talk that the new ships that they might be pledging, navy vessels. This would be more for chasing, it seems, smugglers than for rescuing migrants.
No, we have to do both. We need more vessels, we need more planes, we need more helicopters, both for the rescue missions, but also for the fight against the trafficking networks, against the smugglers. We need both. I think that we can, within the current mandate of Frontex, if we really have political will, a common European political will, we can do both. We can do the fight against the smugglers, against the trafficking networks, because human trafficking is a crime against humanity. Human trafficking is a crime. We have to fight against all these networks. We know that there are a lot of people making a lot of money. We know that it has also now been proved it is one of the way of financial terrorist organizations. We have to do both. Of course, we have to save life, but we have to also to capture and destroy vessels.
The point that's been broached, and was broached most notably by the British, that rescue operations will only attract more would-be migrants.
It is true, of course. It is just very realistic and pragmatic to say this, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to try to save lives. But of course, we have to do it. It is a whole holistic approach that we have to follow. Finally, maybe all the recent tragedies will lead us to have a common European answer and a holistic approach, fighting smugglers and human trafficking networks, saving lives, of course, because this is solidarity. This is in the values, in the core values of the European Union, but also continuing and maybe reinforcing the prevention against illegal immigration. Of course, we also have to fight illegal immigrations with the third countries, with the countries of origin, with the countries of transit. This is a whole new approach. It is a holistic approach, and it'll need a lot of time and a lot of political will. And we have to try to find allies. For instance, in the African Union, we don't hear the African leaders for the moment. We have to try to rebuild a dialogue with some countries that are third countries, countries of origin, countries of transit. It is also a real political work that has to be done.
Gaim Kibriat, what are you expecting from this summit?
Unfortunately, nothing. Unfortunately, nothing. The whole aim, in spite, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
The whole aim, in spite of the rhetoric, is to stem the flow. And the approach adopted is oversimplistic, based on ignorance. If one really wants to come to grips with what is going on, one needs to adopt a holistic approach to the problem, to the complex problem. One needs to address the root and proximate causes that are forcing people to flee. Secondly, we need to distinguish between migrants and asylum seekers. There are people who are fleeing from persecution, and there are people fleeing from economic hardship. The international approach to all this, to these two problems, are completely different. We should not mix the two together because the solutions are completely different. When we adopt a holistic approach, we need to look at the problems that are forcing people to flee. We need to look at the capacity, protection capacity of the first countries of asylum, the neighboring countries. 3, we need to look at the countries, transit countries, such as Libya, Turkey, and we also need to look at the sea, both the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. The whole purpose of intervention at sea should be to save lives rather than to discourage people from coming. Once they have entered the sea, the primary goal should be to save lives.
But you heard on that point, you heard Constance Le Grip say you don't want the mission to become a magnet for attracting more migrants.
That is actually, there is no evidence to back that assumption. The UN evidence suggests that when Mare Nostrum was stopped, the number of migrants and asylum seekers coming to Europe's shores increased dramatically, which means there is no relationship between the search and rescue mission and the number of migrants and asylum seekers trying to cross into Europe or Italy, Greece, and so on. So there is no relationship. It is based on a false assumption. And if you're going to look at the situation Libya is in a state of chaos. There is a complete breakdown of law and order. And there are about, I'm not sure, but over 100,000 people stranded in Libya. And especially the Christians are facing imminent threat to their lives. 30 Ethiopians were beheaded, 3 Eritreans were beheaded, and previously the Coptic Egyptians were beheaded. These people are under enormous pressure. For them, it is a question of life and death. They know the Mediterranean Sea is a killer, but in comparison to the problems they are facing in Libya, probably they think if they make it to Western Europe, they see a future. But in Libya, they see no future. And how long returning people to Libya is like condemning them to death? Is it really realistic that the EU countries would be able to reinstate a functioning sovereign state in Libya in the foreseeable future? So we really need to adopt more creative, more honest approach to the complex problem we're facing.
Constance Le Grip, how do you deal with Libya right now?
There are some big efforts made by the United Nations currently to try to find a political answer to the chaos within Libya is actually, and trying to build a unique government, because as you may know, there are 2 governments. One is officially recognized by the international community and another one is not recognized, is more linked to Islamic organizations. The United Nations is having some very, very small but quite positive results very recently. So we really have to encourage the United Nations and try to see where we as European Union, as united European Nations can help in this process. But in Libya, it is only a political and diplomatic solution that can solve the problem.
Do you
Because
regret
Libya
that?
is
Do
a
you regret
transit
that
zone.
intervention to stop Gaddafi? Because when you see now that there is this power vacuum, there's even ISIS there, and these migrants in the situation that Gaim Kibraid described.
I don't regret the British and the French interventions with the mandate of the United Nations 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago, 4 years ago now. What I regret that in the last 3 years, nothing happened, and that no real political solution was was found and was proposed to the Libyan parties, the Libyan political parties and organizations. And it is only very recently that finally the United Nations began to set up a political process, very progressive and very slow process, of course, but we have lost 3 years. So I don't regret the intervention. I don't think that having been able to fight Gaddafi was a mistake. What was a mistake is that we didn't do anything in the years that came after.
No follow-up plan, you say. We're going to talk about it with our Europe editor, Christophe Robit, when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.